What's up, everybody? It is another episode of the 5280 podcast right here on the MHRT Network and the Broncos Syndicate with Gage Madrid as he is streaming over on his YouTube channel. First things first, before anything, make sure you hit the subscribe button for the MHRT Network page over there on your YouTube, whichever one that you are looking at, and also hit the subscribe button for Broncos Syndicate as well. One thing's first I want to at least touch on for the MHRT Network is in that YouTube channel, we have a join feature. It's essentially a membership. Make sure you click the join tab for whichever one you guys feel comfortable with. I believe there's a $2.99, a $6.99, and an $11.99, unless the prices have changed a little bit with that. But feel free to choose whatever you're comfortable with. As far as being a little bit of a member. And then obviously follow the guys. Follow myself and Gage over there on social media at Gage Madrid NFL and myself at Cameron Parker PO, as well as the other show that I do on Thursday nights now, which is at Mainly Broncos, that Twitter handle as well. First things first, of course, before we dive into any that we will be talking about today, Gages, how are you doing, man? You doing good? You survived the 3-day weekend that was Memorial Weekend?
Yes, and now I am trying to survive a move. So I wanted to fully disclose why there hasn't been content on Broncos Syndicate. It's because I am in the process of a stressful move, packing up our entire house. We're 80% packed. Our stuff is in storage, so we're making progress, probably going to be out of here within a week. So I'm coming out of the closet, Broncos country. After 2 years of recording in here, it's finally going to be over, and we're going to hopefully be in something a little bit more proper and back to the actual content grind, because I need to get back to it. It is my job. So that's something that definitely needs to get back to the steady stream here pretty soon. And I enjoy doing it. It's my passion, and I wanted to apologize and say thank you to the members of Broncos Country and the subscribers of Broncos Syndicate for riding through this with me. It is kind of the dead period of the offseason right now, but I know that my draft coverage wasn't as good as it could have been. I know that a lot of my other coverage could have been better throughout this offseason process, and I want to apologize and tell you guys that better things are to come once we get out of this living situation. So
now, I will say now, not to put you too much on the spot, but there is a little bit of some breaking news in a sense of your recording studio, where you're going to be going live, because it seems to be, for the people that I've talked to in the content community, you recording in the closet has been a very nice tradition over these last couple of years. So a bit of a breaking news, if you will, that whenever you do this move, you doing these shows in a closet, unfortunately, will be coming to an end. Is that correct?
It will, but bigger and better things coming. Hopefully we'll have a little bit closer to a more proper recording studio. The closet's offensive, but that's about it.
And as obviously as you guys could tell, I'm doing this stream from a little bit of a different location. I am not in my den, so I did a little bit of some rearranging around, and I am actually doing it over actually on my kitchen table right now, with the sliding glass door open, because it is about 71 outside, so it's nice and peaceful so far. Over here in Castle Rock. So first things first, of course, we have a lot to talk about. We didn't get a chance to touch on the 5280 at least. We didn't get a chance to touch on the schedule. We knew the schedule was coming, but we didn't get a chance to actually talk about it a little bit more in detail. So let's talk about that now. Let's talk about the schedule. And, obviously we have spent a great deal ad nauseum, obviously, for
your. Talk about Drake May,
right? I'm sure you've talked about it ad nauseum on your channel with Broncos Syndicate, and obviously we did a schedule preview or breakdown over on Mainly the day it broke, obviously, which was I believe was at like 4:30 or 5. Your initial takeaways. Obviously, it's really hard to ignore that early slate of games.
So obviously that early slate of games is brutal, but it's a good test for the Broncos. And I also think it's kind of the ideal time to have some of these games when the entire league is still trying to figure themselves out, when everybody's still trying to figure out what their opponents do well, what they don't do well. It's kind of the period of the year where teams show their own ass. They show their flaws. They show how you can beat them. And I feel like the Broncos are going to be able to take advantage of that. I look at the week 1 game at Arrowhead against Kansas City, a perfect example of this, where Denver should be able to take advantage of the Chiefs' flaws. You know, Patrick Mahomes, I anticipate he's going to play in that week 1 game. A little clip came out of him actually practicing in OTAs earlier today. So I expect he will play, but he's not going to be 100%. He's not going to make all these crazy plays from outside the pocket. Mobility isn't going to be what it normally is with him. And you've got a young secondary in Kansas City playing their first game together. Their offensive line, especially on that right side with the right tackle position, is still quite suspect. So the Kansas City Chiefs are a team that is going to be a little bit flawed early on in the season, and that's when I expect that's where I expect Denver to take advantage. Then you've got Jacksonville. Their roster is honestly not quite as good this year as it was last year. Just evaluating it from top to bottom, they did lose a few key pieces, but they're getting a massive piece back in Travis Hunter. Will he make up for some of the other losses on this roster? Time will tell. Denver's looking to get some revenge after Jacksonville came in and basically blew us out last year. The Rams game, that's just going to be a really tough matchup no matter how you slice it. That's just going to be a daunting matchup. 2 games in California, the 49ers and the Chargers. Obviously, you look at that 49ers game with how loaded that roster is with talent. And even the Chargers, man, you've got a new and improved coaching unit this year on the offensive side of the ball with Mike McDaniel. We'll see what difference that makes and if they can unlock that next level of their offense. You obviously have Seattle there on Thursday Night Football, and that rounds out your first 6 games. I think we've talked about if you can get out of this stretch 3-3, you're going in good shape moving forward. If you can get out of this stretch 4-2, even better.
I think the consensus, right? The consensus, even between us, but just even for most Bronco fans, is if you can come out of this with 3-3, I think you're doing solid. I think overall, one of the biggest things for the Broncos in general, regardless of the fact that it is a 6-game slate, technically 8, if you will, depending on the Chiefs within that game that's after the Cardinals, right? But I just think that when you look at it from the standpoint for the Broncos and that schedule, one of the things that it's going to force them to do, like literally force them to do, is something that needs to happen in 2026, and that is start fast. If they don't start fast, you are talking about a situation that is 2-4. Granted, I will say this, it's not ideal. It is not ideal, but due to the fact that you do have the slate of games, coming up, and then after the bye week, you can make up a really decent amount of ground, even with starting 2-4. You just hope that with a 2-4 out of those 6 games is not detrimental to their psyche, to the mental side of things, because we know that the intangibles of stuff like that does kind of ruin the vibes, of a team. Now, I will say, kind of breaking it down a little bit is that, because you touched on that 6-game slate is, there are areas where they can go 4-2. They can actually turn it around and flip it a little bit to really kind of create momentum because, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars game, the fact it's played that early in the season, I think is a great thing for the Denver Broncos and maybe not so much the Jacksonville Jaguars. You know what I mean? And so I think that for And then even for the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the biggest things that I had been calling for, and I'm sure you saw this too, Gage, but like one of the biggest things that I had been calling for, and whether it was the Chiefs or whether it was the Chargers, is having the opportunity to play them twice before the bye. Change things up a little bit and have them be played twice before the bye. And I think we got that. And I think that the reason why I'm a huge fan of the Chiefs necessarily is I know that we kind of spoke ill will about the Chiefs necessarily in their roster. I do expect some bounce back for the Chiefs, but I think that with where things are at with them and with that roster, you're playing them and you can knock them out. You can literally knock them out of your own divisional record and necessarily sweep them before the bye. So if they do get hot after their own bye week, you don't really care because you won that tiebreaker over them because you swept them and you're undefeated against them at 2-0.
Yeah, I agree. There's going to be improvement with Kansas City. I just think it's going to take a little bit of time for it to get there. You know, I believe there's going to be an adjustment period with Patrick Mahomes, an adjustment period with their offensive line, an adjustment period with their secondary, and that's where you hope Denver can take advantage. But to your point about starting fast, that's something that Sean Payton's teams historically have not done. He's got a 31-32 record in the month of September. So you're going to have to defeat that. You're going to have to defeat the odds there if you're going to start off fast. So you've got Kansas City, Jacksonville, Los Angeles, and San Francisco in the month of September. If you can go 2-2 in that 4-game stretch, then I'd say you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, definitely. And then you kind of go through and you talk about it from even the game side of things. Like I said, there is a window there. Like there actually is a window there where you can go 4-2. Now, I think one of the last things we need to say here, and I think there's a bit of a misconception of things, and this comes from national pundits, when they say that the Denver Broncos 2026 schedule is brutal. It's not brutal. Did you get a chance to actually look at like the way it's ranked in terms of like, for all intents and purposes, the NFL RPI, right? Like the way things rank in terms of strength of schedule, it's not hard. It's actually middle of the pack. The reason why a lot of these so-called pundits nationally are seeing it's a brutal schedule is because of these 6 games. And if they and if they actually do come away with that in 4-2, I think they will be relatively okay. And so much so that it kind of leads us to a record prediction a little bit, that if by chance this team does go 13-4, 14-3 again, it's because they went through that 6-game gauntlet relatively unscathed.
Yeah. And if you look at the back half of the schedule, once you get through that 6-game gauntlet, it gets relatively easier. You've got that road game against Arizona, which is the closest thing you're going to get to a bunny game in the NFL. If you can't beat Arizona with how bad their roster is right now, then you shouldn't be in serious conversations to win the Super Bowl. You've got the Kansas City game, which admittedly is going to be tough, but it's at home, so that does give Denver the leg up. You've got Carolina on the road, which, yes, could be a trap game, but I also think that's a game where Denver's just better, and they should showcase that. You've got the Raiders, the Steelers, the Dolphins, the Jets, the Raiders again. So you have a really favorable stretch there heading into that Christmas game against the Buffalo Bills, where it gets a little bit more difficult to round out the schedule with that game. Patriots on the road. We still don't know exactly when that game is going to be in terms of kickoff time. And then you've got the Chargers game at home, which could very well decide the division for you. If you can go through that stretch of relatively easy games with a winning record, then you're going to be in good shape.
And I think what makes it a bit interesting in the sense of what could get dicey, just in terms of having a conversation, might be the Raiders. And the reason why I say that is just because at that point in the season, let's just say they do kind of the unthinkable, which is they start Fernando Mendoza week 1. Well, by that point, and maybe if they don't, but by that point of week 11, Mendoza will have reached basically the capped number of games that he had for a college football season, which means he could be reaching another level for where he is as a quarterback and that system under Clint Kubiak. Things could be entirely different, right? Like things could be entirely different for that team. So I don't necessarily foresee that to be happening, but I think it's at least something that needs to be talked about because it's one that's like, well, because I think that the important thing is you want to be as objective as you possibly can, even though we as Bronco fans have a pretty decent feeling that they will sweep the Raiders this year. It's just you just know with the way things were as the state of the Raiders, it was pretty bad last year. So you have to at least anticipate that you're going to be getting an extra win or two or more due to the fact that the offense kind of lends itself to the idea for Kubiak that Brock Bowers will be used a little bit more. They will have in air quotes, competent running game a little bit now, knowing the fact that they have Ashton Jency and Mike Washington as being kind of like their running back duo, if you will. So I think it's going to be a very interesting team to certainly watch. That it's kind of like one of those teams that could fly under the radar and kind of scare you at that point in the season for weeks 11 and then what is it, week 16?
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm definitely with you. I could see a world even where the Raiders are rolling with Kirk Cousins and they have a winning record by the time they play the Broncos that first time. So Denver is definitely going to have to play well in those Raiders games. Even when the Raiders were playing poor football last year, both of those games were relatively tight. It wasn't like Denver was blowing out the Raiders. In fact, that game in Denver on Thursday night, it was pretty dicey for a while there if Denver was even going to get out of there with a win. You've got to play your best football in these division games, regardless of how good your opponent is, because these are the teams that know you the best. And Clint Kubiak, he's been in Denver before. He's very familiar with how we do things here. Even though this is a slightly different roster, I still believe that this Raiders team is going to be formidable this year. And yeah, you certainly can't brush over them. And you can't even brush over that Cardinals game. There's no such thing as an easy win in the NFL. Everybody would have thought going into the New York Jets game last year that Denver was going to roll all over them. What happened? The New York Jets played scrappy, tough football. Denver didn't play their best football traveling into London, and they ended up barely scraping by in that one. So, yeah, I'm completely with you. Denver cannot afford any of those kind of games where they're barely scraping by.
Welders fans, you kind of missed our conversation about the first 6 games. 1-5 start would be a nightmare scenario, I would say. Even 2-4, maybe. But I think the thing that we kind of talked about is when people have talked about this as a brutal schedule, and again, we're beating a dead horse, bringing it back up again. But to your question, Welder, though, it's like if they can come out of that and they play relatively well against these teams just a little bit before the bye, meaning the Cardinals and the Panthers before the bye, and then they have that stretch of games after, I think they'll be okay. I do think that they'll be relatively okay. And I think that kind of lends us to this idea of our record prediction, when we talk about it. I think when you are a playoff team, even a Super Bowl contender team, because all it really cares about is once you hit the playoffs, you hit the playoffs, right? Even if you're a Super Bowl contender team, you hit the playoffs. And I think that it should be for any team that your floor like that is 10-7. And I think the Broncos' floor is 10-7. And that means that 10-7 is still going to get you in the playoffs. And so I think that where it kind of comes back to it, Gage, is kind of the conversation that I did have last year when we had our record prediction, where I think I had originally said 12-5, and You guys were really rolling with the idea of 13-4 or even 14-3, which obviously I was wrong on that. It did happen. They did go 14-3 and 13-4. But I would just be careful of like predictions like that, especially now, because, well, one, we weren't really predicting a 10-game winning streak in that year necessarily, right? And also, two, if they are 13-4, 14-3, that's a world where they are challenging for the number one seed again. And it's hard to predict that year in and year out in a schedule like this. It's going to be a little bit tricky for them to actually go 14-3 again, let alone 13-4. But I do think probably 13-4 is that ceiling for probably what they can do.
I've talked about this before. It's possible that the Denver Broncos are playing better football than they did last year. They're a more cohesive unit overall, but they win maybe 2 or 3 less games than they did last year. It's just because it is a slightly tougher schedule, and I think the AFC as a whole is going to be slightly tougher, so you have to account for that. Is Denver going to get the number one seed again? I don't know. They've got a really good chance to, but it's far from a guarantee, and there is that possibility of regression when it comes to the defense, right? Because they've played at such a high level these last couple of years. Can they sustain that for another season? How's Bo Nix going to look coming off the ankle injury? Is the run game going to be more consistent this year than it was last year? Is the offensive line still going to play at the same level? Are the injuries going to come back to haunt us this year? There's a lot of factors here that are going to progress over the course of the season. So I don't know, man. I honestly feel like this Broncos team has their work cut out for them this year.
Yeah.
But if they can prove that they are a legit team heading into the playoffs, then I don't think there's anybody out there that can stop them.
And Gregory, I said it. You know, I said it. I said that I was wrong. I said I was wrong. I said that, you know, I don't see a world where they're going 13-4, 14-3, but it was just one where it's hard to predict that because you're predicting them to be the number one seed. You know what I mean? You know, and it's hard to predict that, especially the leap of 10-7 the year before. It's quite a leap. And you're predicting necessarily a 10-game winning streak within that. That is almost darn near impossible to kind of predict a little bit. But I agree with you, Gage, in a sense. This is, I think, going to be a better football team. But it's just one where it's just the AFC is tougher. And I think that the division to a certain degree is tougher. You know, even though there is just a little bit of some question marks with some teams going forward of where are they, you know, because I do think the Chiefs are hitting a bit of a rock and a hard place, you know, even though that, you know, I think they'll, for all the games that they'll play, even us, it'll be tough. It'll be physical. It'll be hard games. I just think that there's a very real chance they sweep the Chiefs and sweep the Raiders this year while also splitting against the Chargers. So I just think that it's one where, you know, it's going to be a very tough situation for the Broncos and how well they can be able to really duplicate what they did last year.
I agree.
So one of the other conversations regarding schedule is some of the very obvious questions that do get asked, which is the trap games, right? Like, what are some trap games that you could foresee with this schedule, and who are those teams?
I mean, I already touched on one, Carolina on the road. You know, that's a team that could play some really good football going into this season. They were playing some good football at the back half of last year. Bryce Young looked like he was starting to really figure things out. Their run game looked good in spurts, then had some moments where it would completely shut down. You've got a defense that I would say overall is still devoid of talent, but Ejiro Evero did a good job of maximizing what he could get out of that subpar talent. So you look at Carolina, man, they've added some pieces this offseason. I think they're going to be a force, and I think it's very possible that Broncos country is slightly overlooking them. Other than that, man, I think a lot of these opponents, we know that they're going to be tough. Of course, you've got the Raiders, but I don't really think it's fair to call a division game a trap game because everybody knows each other, and you got to play your best ball against these division opponents. And outside of that, I think it's pretty tough to find a true trap game. Maybe the Jets, just because of how they played us last year, but I don't think Denver wants that to happen again, and they're going to be making hell adjustments going into that Jets game. So that's kind of where I am right now. The Panthers is probably the biggest one on the schedule that sticks out for me.
You know, you might kind of hate me on this, but it's a game that is within that stretch of the first, 6 of the 8 games, and it's the Cardinals. We basically played the entire NFC West in those in the 8-game stretch of the season, if you will, 9 if you include the Panthers before the bye week, right? But I'm saying the Broncos should very well handle the Cardinals. What gets dicey is the Cardinals have a head coach of Mike LaFleur. It's a new coach. It's a new system. It is a system that I think is very well advanced in the NFL as of right now. It is of the Shanahan system, one that is of the McVays, of the Kyle Shanahans, of even the Matt LaFleur's, his brother. He's going to be building extensions of that with his own offense. And frankly, the offensive pieces, for the most part for the Cardinals, is better. Even with the addition of Jeremiah Love, their running game should be vastly improved depending on what happens, even with, say, a trade of James Conner to the Green Bay Packers, given the news of what happened with Josh Jacobs, today. But it's just like their running game should be better. And even the playmakers, I think, are better, if you will, of the emergence of Michael Wilson. And I'm sure that we'll see, relatively speaking, a better year of Marvin Harrison Jr. And then who knows? We know that the defense can be suspect for the Cardinals, but you just never know. You just never know. Teams kind of rise to occasion. So the Cardinals are kind of a team where I'm kind of like looking at it, and especially too in that gauntlet of the, of those 6 games. Am I trying to say that I foresee a Sean Payton team letting their guard down? Absolutely not. But it's just as far as a talking piece, it's something that I would be remiss if I didn't talk about it, because it's something that could really weigh on you. You know what I mean? It's something that could really weigh on you in those first, 6 games where you're playing basically the entire NFC West.
It does have the potential for a trap game just because of all the factors going for you heading into that game. You are going to be battle tested going against that Shanahan McVay style system because you've got Jacksonville, Liam Cohen. He comes from the Sean McVay tree. You've got Sean McVay himself in week 3. You've got Kyle Shanahan himself in week 4. You've got Mike McDaniel in week 5. Then you've got, I can't recall who the new Seahawks offensive coordinator is, but they still run that same Shanahan McVay system. So heading into that game, you'll basically have been facing it for 5 consecutive games. So that does give you a leg up there. You also have a questionable quarterback situation in Arizona. Are they going to pay Jacoby Brissett, or are they just going to roll into the season with Gardner Minshew and Carson Beck? What's going to happen there? And Denver usually travels into Arizona very well. Broncos country is very heavy down there, and they drive into that stadium. It's a sea of orange every time the Broncos play there, regardless if it's preseason or regular season. I'll never forget that 2018 Thursday night game where Denver went into Arizona when they were down at their lowest and just kicked them in the teeth, man. It was an absolute blowout.
Yeah, Von Miller went to the media and said, we're going to be kicking the crap out of the Cardinals, and they
sure enough, they did, man.
And actually, Vaughn had one of the best pass rushing reps that I remember of anyone, where he blew up. He was going up against the tackle, and he blew up the guard, and then he beat the tackle, and then he sacked Josh Rosen and forced a fumble on Josh Rosen. So it's. Yes, and obviously the famous interception where Todd Davis and Chris Harris Jr. high-fived as they were going in the end zone. And It was the beginning of what could be with Cortland Sutton, with the I believe it was the pass from Emmanuel Sanders, right?
Yep.
To Cortland Sutton, and then it was the trio of Demaryius Thomas, the late Demaryius Thomas, and Emmanuel Sanders and Cortland. It was a pretty special moment on that one. So yeah, it was. I remember that game quite well. Again, I'm not as of right now, and then I would, if I'm forecasting the future on that, I'm saying the Broncos are be winning that game. It's just something that it kind of leaps out at you, given the fact that that's a gauntlet. And now I will say, when I talked about them relative of what could possibly happen and surprise you, it's hard to say that a divisional opponent could be a trap game. But it's one where I can see, depending on the level of play, it's hard to predict now, but it's like I think that's the side of it too, is trap games kind of evolve also too within a season, right? And so I think I could see, like with the Raiders, as we were talking about earlier, they could be that surprise where it's just like, as we were talking about earlier, they have a winning record, as you were pointing out, like maybe with Kirk Cousins at that point, after the bye week. I think where it kind of calms it down a little bit is just the fact it's after the bye week, right? Like it's after the bye week. But I think that the thing that just really kind of keeps it easy and makes us sleep easy at night is we know the Broncos roster and this team will be better overall than the team last year. And it may not be reflective of the record that was 14-3 last year, but we know the team is going to be well prepared and more battle tested, going into this year. So that kind of lends us to this next conversation that we'll be having, Gage, and that is the roster. We are going to be leading up to OTAs, training camp. We pretty much entered the dead period of news, and so it kind of makes sense to really have an early stage talking process of the roster and with where things are at. The UDFA's really pushing for that roster spot, late draft picks pushing for that roster spot. It's always a fun conversation to talk about because it's the underdog. It is the underdog story of who are those players that are going to be really making that impression, who are the training camp battles, the roster bubble candidates. It's just the early stage conversation, now leading after the schedule as far as the next type of conversation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So are we going to be diving into the roster?
Let's go right ahead.
All right. Do you want to bring up the R lads?
Yes. Let me see if I can share screen. Obviously, there's ads because, of course, there's ads.
Yeah, they don't let you dodge it with an ad blocker.
So on the offensive side of the ball, you have obviously Cortland Sutton. Jalen Waddle is the newest addition. Troy Franklin, and then Garrett Bowles, Ben Powers, Luke Wattenberg, Quinn Miners, Mike McGlinchey, Adam Troutman, obviously Bo Nix. No quarterback discussion over here in Denver. J.K. Dobbins, Adam Prentice is your fullback. And then, of course, the players are going to be backing up that they list here. Little Jordan Humphrey, Marvin Mims, Pat Bryant, Matt Parrott, Gage Casey, the draft pick that was from Boise State, Alex Forsyth backing up Luke Wattenberg, Alex Pavcheski, Frank Crum backing up Mike McGlinchey, Evan Ingram backing up Adam Troutman, and then they have Joseph Manjack, one of the undrafted free agents, staying key. And then they have Michael Bandy, who's everybody's favorite wide receiver, is Sean Payton's favorite wide receiver. And then you have Gavin Ortega, one of the other undrafted free agents, Nick Gargulio, who's going to be recovering from his ACL injury, Michael Dieter, who's a center that they signed, I believe was last year, and then obviously Calvin Mundungus Throckmorton is on here. Tyler Miller, one of the prized undrafted free agents, is on here. And then everybody's favorite, Nate Atkins, and then Jonah Coleman, is in there, along with R.J. Harvey is in there as well, and Jarrett Stidham backing up Bo Nix, and Sam Ellinger backing up Bo. And then you go into the other players like Michael Woods, who they just recently signed this year, actually this offseason. Not a free agent signing, but it was just more of like a signing, if you will. I guess it doesn't necessarily qualify as a free agent signing, I guess. Colby Castis is one of the 3 wide receivers that has been getting a lot of buzz, along with Dane Key, and I believe it was Manjack or Cameron Ross. But they're getting like the biggest buzz. And then obviously Nash Jones, one of the guards, Justin Jolie or Jolly, depending on however it is that you want to pronounce that. Lucas Kroll, everybody's favorite player on the team, best player on the team. And then Dallin Bentley, the 7th round draft pick, Caleb Lohner, maybe Sean Payton's favorite tight end of that entire room.
The new Lucas Kroll.
Yeah. Jaleel McLaughlin, Tyler Bidet, Tyler Toilet, and then Cody Schrader. I think they cut him, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know if that's been updated, but Cody Schrader is listed here as far as in here. And obviously Adam Prentice is fullback. So we'll start with that, and then we'll bring up the our lads again. So what's your initial thoughts of the offensive depth chart?
Well, I mean, it's generally a good sign when your primary competition, and you tweeted this earlier, is swing tackle. Like, you don't really have any competition for starting spots here on this offense.
Yeah.
So that is really, really good, man. That's something that you can't normally say about an NFL team, because you normally have at least one starting competition for some position out there. Now, there is going to be a little bit of a competition for a starting spot on the defensive side of the ball, but pivoting back to the offensive side, man, it's just crazy depth. You've got backups on the offensive line that could be fringe starters on pretty much any other team, with Frank Crum, Alex Palczewski, Matt Peart, Alex Forsyth, Gage Casey. And you got other competitions on this offensive line. Nick Gargiulo coming off of his injury. Is he going to be fighting with Gage Casey for that backup guard spot? You've got Alex Palczewski and Frank Crum. Maybe they're in a little bit of a competition. Tyler Miller, he comes into the mix. That's the main area on the offense where I'm looking at competition. And then you look at the tight end room as well. I think that it's a little bit more clear cut. We know Troutman's going to be on the team. We know that Evan Ingram's going to be on the team. We know Justin Jolie is going to be on the team. Most likely, Dallin Bentley is going to be on the 53-man roster as well. The question really is, are they going to carry a 5th tight end? Excuse me. Are they going to carry a 5th tight end? And if so, which tight end is it? Is it Nate Atkins? Is it Caleb Lohner? I strongly doubt it's going to be Lucas Kroll. But you look at competition there. And then one that's flying under the radar a little bit is backup quarterback. Sean Payton said that the backup quarterback spot could be open for the taking here. And if Sam Ellinger comes in and outplays Jarrett Stidham, that could make Stidham's contract expendable.
Yeah, well, and it's a situation where you mentioned it, even I mentioned it, of players that could very well interest the Broncos when it comes to the quarterback position or even the backup quarterback spot. And that is that is specifically the New Orleans Saints of all teams. And that's just because of Spencer Rattler, who it seems like the Denver Broncos were quite interested in, even in that Bo Nix draft. So if Tyler Shuck is the answer, and it seems, talking with a lot of people and reading between the lines of social media and New Orleans Saints Twitter, that he should have won the Offensive Rookie of the Year over, or in their own minds, if you will, over Jackson Dart. It's one where it seems like they very much want to ride, at least at this point, the Tyler Shuck train, which leaves Spencer Rattler as an option, or something that I've been really pumping the table for if they ever do move on, because I don't necessarily think of something as a rather attractive option than those two, and that is Spencer Rattler and Zach Wilson.
Yes. I mean, listen, I've made it clear that I really respected Zach Wilson's time here. I thought that he grew in this system, and I actually trusted Wilson more than I trusted Jarrett Stidham. And I think Jarrett Stidham proved why you just can't trust him in that AFC Championship game. And that's why I believe they are opening up this backup quarterback competition. If Sam Ehlinger doesn't get it done, I could absolutely see the Broncos maybe pivoting towards one of these Saints quarterbacks. Hey, Max, are you a Chiefs fan?
Maybe.
Broncos Kingdom, let's ride.
I will say we had the conversation, Jordan, Brandon, and I, when we were looking at the roster and we're looking at camp battles, roster bubble candidates. There's not really a player. Frankly, the only player I would probably label as a surprise might be Adam Troutman, just given the contract and what they gave him. But even if they moved on from Evan Ingram, I don't know if I would want to label that as a surprise necessarily.
Sure.
But it would just be one, given the contract of the money that they would be moving off of. It would beg the question of, okay, we're moving off of him to free up money. What does that mean of an addition that's coming next? That would be the conversation as far as that. But there's not really a surprise. There is not really a surprise candidate on this team. And I think the other side of the conversation too, with this is there's wants. And I need to phrase this because there's wants of what we want to have happen, right? But we don't think it's going to happen. You know what I mean? And I think that some of the tight end conversation might be the exact same conversation of the linebacker core, right? Because I think for me personally, and I know that, you and I've had the conversation before, but it's just me personally, I would love a tight end room of Adam Troutman, Evan Ingram, Justin Jolie, Dallin Bentley. You moved on contractually because of where things were of Nate Atkins and Lucas Kroll, because it was such very few money. You move off of them, and you have Caleb Lohner on your practice squad who you can develop, or frankly, he's your tight end option that you can kind of call up. And frankly, the only part there that would make you flexible enough to have 5 is, well, it lends itself to the idea that can you really keep a guy like that on the practice squad, knowing the fact that he did have interest from other NFL teams before signing, with the Broncos. That's really on the other question. And as far as the biggest one, as far as the wants, if you will, is that linebacker core. We want, as much as we respect the fact that Justin Sternad has earned that contract and earned the right to at least be seen as a starter, I still foresee it a little bit like a PJ Locke situation. You and I've had that conversation before where, it's he earned the contract. He earned the opportunity to be that starter. But unfortunately, in the opportunities that was given to him for a full-time role, meaning PJ Locke, unfortunately, we got a chance to see what he was. And that was a relatively solid and good backup, for the Denver Broncos. And I hope that's not the case for Sternad, but I think as far as the wants, we want by season's end a player like a Red Murdoch to step up and really take on some of that role, or maybe even a Torian York if he's able to make that 53-man roster. So I think there's that case of when we have this conversation, it's the wants, but also realizing what is probably likely to happen.
Yeah, exactly. You think about this tight end room, for example, in an ideal world, Adam Troutman's gone and Dallin Bentley supplants him. Is that going to happen? Probably not in year 1. You look at Evan Ingram, in an ideal world, he's gone and Justin Jolie supplants him. Is that going to happen? Again, probably not. So those are 2 players that I kind of view it as you're basically stuck with them this year. And then you talked about that linebacker room, man. You want one of these young linebackers to step up for you because you want somebody that long-term could replace Justin Sternad or even more ideally Alex Singleton. So yeah, Red Murdoch is a guy that I look at whose game profiles quite similarly to Alex Singleton. So I look at him, maybe he can find himself into this rotation. Torian York, you look at these backup linebackers, that's another spot where competition is definitely going to be abound because you've got Jonah Ellis who's going to be stepping into that role at least part-time. Jordan Turner's still here. Corinne Reed's still here. Lavelle Bailey's still here. You've got really healthy depth there at linebacker.
At least right now. I mean, I think it's really easy to say that on paper, but due to the fact that there were so injuries, it kind of exposed the idea that they really didn't have any depth, right? Like they really didn't have any depth of that linebacker core. And I think
you hope to now with Murdoch and York.
Exactly. And I think that's also one of those maybe traps you kind of fall into for ourselves when you get into that kind of conversation where we say it's depth, but then by the point of the midway point of the season, it's like, well, was it really a deep linebacker room? Not necessarily.
Is it depth or the depth?
Right, exactly. And I think that when you look at it from the standpoint of that linebacker core, it does go to the want, right? Of the want and what you want to see happen. And I think that the thing that at least has a door open for you is the idea that as much as the prospects of what we have loved, of what we have loved with guys like a Jordan Turner, a Lavelle Bailey, and a Corinne Reed, as much as we have loved that, they still fall into that same category that is Torian York and, relatively speaking, Red Murdoch, and that is undrafted free agents. Players that are, you really hate to say it, are expendable, and players that if you were able to find players that frankly are just better and you were fortunate enough to grab them, guys like Torian York and Red Murdoch, who we have said the Broncos were receiving phone calls for, of the Mr. Irrelevant pick. They were receiving phone calls for, and I'm sure they were receiving calls, or York was receiving calls, and York just decided, you know what? I'm looking at this team and I'm looking the way it's structured. It's structured the exact same way that I have loved when I was there at A&M under Mike Elko, and so I wonder if there is just a case where like they can potentially see an opening there. And the part that you and I talked about was like, it almost felt like a recruiting type of way, that the way the Broncos looked at it with this draft class, which was you got Murdoch and then you have Torian York, who both complement each other so well, where York isn't necessarily the speediest guy sideline to sideline, but his instincts really make up for a lot of that speed, where he can be able to make up so much ground because of how smart and instinctual he is, to where it is like like a Luke Kuechly in that sense, where it's like he knows where that play is going even before it even happens, to where Murdoch may necessarily be a Singleton replacement, but that doesn't mean he'll be the one wearing your green dot. The one that probably in their future that's going to be wearing your green dot might actually end up being Torian York.
Sure, absolutely.
So going forward with this defense, when you do bring up the defense again here, there's not really a lot of stuff as far as like training camp battles that's going to like impact it where I think it's on the starting unit. Because even then, like, I'm not expecting Riley Moss to be traded, but it's a conversation. And I think it's a conversation that is, well, what's the future going to be holding for this? And that's the thing is like, I think that, so it's not necessarily a training camp battle, but it's one of the top things that I think all of us in Broncos country are wanting to watch, which is, where are we at with Riley Moss? Is he disciplined a little bit more? Has he been using that punching bag a little bit more to kind of really keep those penalties down? And then to that same point, where are we at with Jahdae Barron? Because I think there is a world where Jahdae Barron and Riley Moss are still on that same team, and Jahdae Barron becomes the player that Peyton specifically mentioned in one of his pressers last year, the year that he was drafted, and he single-handedly mentioned the name Malcolm Jenkins with Jade Barron. I want to remind people who Malcolm Jenkins was. He was not exactly a Kareem Jackson necessarily, but he was a player that was, to use a Sean Payton term, of the defensive side of the ball. He was his joker of the secondary, where he played corner and he played safety. There was even moments last year, due to the depth of linebacker, where he was basically playing a star position. He was playing the linebacker position at some points. Not a lot, but he was playing some points of the linebacker position. So there is at least a world where Moss is still here, maybe on a discount, whatever you want to call it. But there's at least a world where they do extend Jaquan McMillan and they do extend Riley Moss, but they're using Jade Barron as a true chess piece of that secondary.
I mean, that's kind of your ideal scenario, right? I think the biggest question relative to Riley Moss, and if he were to get traded, is do they trust Barron to play full-time on the boundary?
Right.
As of right now, I'd say probably not. But the ideal role for Barron really is that chess piece joker type player. And the Broncos have two of those kinds of players with Barron and Talanoa Hufanga. They're both jokers that can move all over the place, but they really do different things. So you can use them interchangeably in those respective roles. I could see a scenario where Denver finds more extended play time for Jade Barron, but the main rotation stays intact as far as the personnel is concerned. So that's what I could definitely see there. But if Jade Barron does take those steps forward and maybe he does develop into more of a player that you can trust to play on the boundary, you can at least have those conversations about maybe moving on from Riley Moss.
Well, you know, and that's the side of it too, is maybe not necessarily UDFAs, you know, but like there's Chris Abrams-Drain, the forgotten corner, you know, of that cornerback room, where I'm sure they want to necessarily see, you know, the development still be there for him, because and I think that this kind of goes to, not to twist this into this, but it's a George Payton conversation of the fact that, yeah, he does fall in love with the cornerback position, but there's a reason why the Denver Broncos have arguably the best cornerback room in the entire NFL, and that is because he really has done a tremendous job of investing in that room. And now because of that, he could, if he wanted to, flip some of these players for pretty decent capital. Like if he wanted to flip Moss, he might be able to get at most a second-round pick, a third-round pick. You know, he might be able to swing something. You know, even a Jaquan McMillan, right? I'm expecting a contract extension, but we at least have to entertain the idea that teams could be calling necessarily for a J-Mac, right? You know, and even though we signed a second-round tender, I don't foresee a team giving up a second-round pick, but it goes to show you, you know, the value for which they feel he brings and that room.
Absolutely. And another spot where we look at possible competition on defense, you know, that defensive end spot. It has Malcolm Roach listed here, but he's not really a defensive end. He's kind of more of a rotational defensive tackle. I would say that the guys that we're looking at here are Tyler Onyedem, Ini Uwazurike, and Savion Jones. Those are the three predominant John Franklin Myers replacements that I'm looking at. The reason why I say Ini Uwazurike is because the Broncos really, really liked what they saw from him in a limited role last year, and they want to find a way to get him on the field. Maybe they kick Malcolm Roach outside and then put Uwazurike a little bit more on the inside in some of these rotational packages. I don't know, but those three guys are definitely guys I'd keep an eye on as far as who could step in and be that true JFM replacement. And right now, if I had to pick a favorite, I'd probably say Ini Uwazurike.
Agree. I mean, you know, as much as I am very interested to see what things will happen with Savion Jones, And it seems like the idea when they drafted him was for him to be the JFM replacement. But due to the fact that Awama Wazarike bet on himself this last year, he literally became, by season's end, I would say, the JFM replacement. Now, I think what'll be interesting is Tyler Onyadam. The Broncos have really fell in love with the idea of chemistry, like actual team chemistry of bringing in players that they have previously played with. They did that with Miles Scott, the wide receiver turned safety from Illinois. The Broncos love the University of Illinois. And as much as there was that scandal where we all thought Wazarike was going to be off the roster, he was not. He was not off the roster, right? He was not off the roster. And so in doing so, he stayed on, and he really turned out to be, in a very short amount of time, a productive player, even in spurts. And that's what has made this defensive line one of the best defensive lines in football, because they can really condense a lot of those areas because of the rotations and depth. And it has made it easier at times for some of these linebackers, like an Alex Singleton, and even due to the lack of depth, it's made it easier for them because of the amount that they can clog up a middle. And I think that for the reason why I say Tyler Onyadam, if you go back and look at history of what A&M has been able to produce from a schematic type of thing, they don't necessarily garner a lot of pressure in terms of sacks, but they garner a lot of pressure in getting in the backfield. And I think where Tyler Onyadam, where he's coming from, of guys like a Shamar Stewart, or even who's the other guy that was...
crap, what's his name?
It was the same type of name, if you will, but it was just it was a Shamar Stewart and someone else who sounded the exact same from A&M. But they were productive. They weren't necessarily as productive with A&M, but they made themselves due to the fact that they had high upside. And Onyadam fits that, of where they weren't necessarily productive, but you could get a chance to see the upside and the high motor and the way that they move into the backfield. And I think Onyadam is one of those players where you're putting them into a situation where he's comfortable. You're putting him in a situation where he's going to flourish, I think, in the initial part of that. And I think that, when you factor in the relationship that he has with Awama Wazarike when he was with Iowa State, that I think is going to go a very long way. Now, I think they do want to develop Savion Jones. I do. But it's just a very interesting conversation, because I think that maybe for the people that were really high on Savion Jones, maybe they were a bit too premature of that in terms of Savion Jones. I'm excited to see what he can do this year, but Tyler Onyadam, and then that chemistry with Awama Wazarike, who seems to be the leader in the clubhouse for that JFM role, plus not to mention the versatility that I think Roach is going to present for you, because I think that as much as he is listed, to your point, as much as he is listed as a defensive end, we've seen him be rather flexible enough to where he can play on that inside and play on that outside. And he's been rather productive at that as well.
Absolutely. And that just goes to show, again, the depth and the construction through the trenches that this team is prioritized, man. And healthy competition at all kinds of spots. I'm really excited to see how it plays out in training camp. This is going to be a really fun camp for the people like me who want to see how the depth plays out on the roster. We care about the 52nd, 53rd spot on the roster. We're trying to see who's fighting out for these last few spots on the roster, and that's going to be really exciting here over the course of these next couple of months to figure out.
Thanks for the support, Jack. I have to ask, how did your show go with Richie Incognito? That would be Husker legend Richie Incognito. And
no way.
They
did not.
I'm assuming so, but when he said Richie, and he's a Raiders fan, I have to assume it's Richie Incognito, Husker legend, and of course Raider, Richie Incognito. Ronnie asks, is there a lot of pressure on Savion Jones? I think there is, but it's one where I see him on the roster, but it's one where I think that I guess it's one where you kind of talk yourself into it, but maybe it's one where you maybe talk yourself into the possibility of a surprise candidate. And so it's one where it's like, would Savion Jones necessarily be considered a surprise cut candidate? Maybe.
I mean, yeah, just because of the draft capital you spent on him. But by that same token, though, if he doesn't develop and you've got further development from Iniwazurike or from Tyler Onyedem, then maybe I would say that leans more towards a surprising cut candidate for me.
Right. But it's one where you kind of do. I could see both ways. For me, and I'm talking myself like through it. It's like, well, if you haven't really produced and you really haven't produced at all, is it really a surprise? You know what I mean? Like, so I could see both sides of it, because it's like, and where I think it kind of falls in line of it being a surprise is the capital and the draft capital that you invested in him and stuff like that. But obviously we know, and I think it's been one where it's been made before, but it's like plans change, right? Like, and I think that's kind of something that needs to be said, is plans do change when it comes to, something like that. So Mike says, all I'm hearing is Super Bowl talk here once they get A.J. Brown. I'm so much happier with Waddle. By the way, one of the things we should probably touch on, I don't necessarily know if I agree with this as we're kind of talking, and I guess it sort of falls in line a little bit with us talking about rosters. But it was about, what was it? So Kalshi tweeted, who is the best supporting cast? Bo Nix was 6. They listed Matthew Stafford at 1, Jared Goff at 2. Interestingly enough, they said Brock Purdy at 3 with that wide receiving core. I think Brock Purdy has to be in there, but I don't think I'd be putting him 3. Caleb Williams at 4. Darnold at 5, understandable. Bo Nix at 6, over Josh Allen, and over Dak Prescott, and over Jalen Hurts, and over Jordan Love at 10. There is a surprise. There is a surprise that I think probably should be in here, and he's not played great with his former team, but I think he's one, if you're into fantasy football, or if you're really into one where I could see a really bounce back year for him. But we're talking about best supporting cast. How do you not put Kyler Murray in that conversation? The guy's got Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and then obviously they just signed Juwan Jennings. How are you not putting Kyler Murray in that conversation?
I agree. I actually think that Minnesota should be higher than Denver just by virtue of Justin Jefferson alone. But that's just me.
Well, and the other part of it too is, do I think it's going to actually come to fruition? No. But one of the other ones that they said who has the worst supporting cast, like the worst, was Michael Penix and Tua Tagovailoa. Dude, they have Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and Kyle Pitts. Like
I was just going to say,
yeah,
like Tua should be up there a lot higher, or Penix, but it's getting
right.
Tua.
And again, this is not us like actually saying we believe in Tua or even Penix necessarily to get the job done. It's about supporting cast. They actually should be in there as well. And frankly, I would argue that might actually even be top 5. But from the Broncos side of things, I will say this, from the Broncos side of things, it goes to show you why the importance of the addition of Jalen Waddle has done to that team, meaning the Broncos. It has really put the Broncos at such an advantage now where it's a conversation that I think even we had. And it's a point that I think even you made on Broncos Syndicate and me on mainly Broncos, but it's like, it's the word complete. When you add Jalen Waddle to this room, it really lifts the floor. It lifts the ceiling of that room. And so it really does make me happy finally to get a chance to see Bo Nix actually have what is considered to be the best supporting cast. Not the best, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. I still have questions about this receiving core, man. I wonder deep down, like, do they have a wide receiver 3? I don't feel like they truly do. Unless we see another big step forward from Troy Franklin, I'm not ready to call him a true clear-cut 3. Then you've got Marvin Mims. He's got to take some steps forward with his route running. If he can do that, he definitely could be your number 3. But we haven't seen it yet. Jalen Waddle, I expect him fully to be an elite receiver here in Denver. But there is that small little sliver of a possibility that it doesn't quite work out here. He doesn't develop that chemistry with Bo Nix. I'm not holding that against them right now, though. Cortland Sutton, will he still be playing at that same high level? I expect him to, but will he? I mean, there's a possibility of regression there, certainly. You know, Pat Bryant, how does he progress in this second year in the system? Is he able to overcome the concussion issues? We can't sit here and pretend like there isn't a scenario where this wide receiving core completely busts out.
Yeah, but it also goes to our conversation we had sort of to begin the conversation, which is if you are having a conversation of wide receiver 3, you're a really good football team. But
True.
I think that when you look at it from the vantage point, and it goes to a conversation, I think, frankly, that even kind of started last year with me and you and kind of like figuring out what's the identity for what this team needs to be, if you will. And what did I tell you? Like I said, there's a part of me, and look, I'm not trying to disparage the idea that they needed a rushing attack. They needed a rushing attack. But kind of put your thinking cap on a little bit for what this room is and the history of the said people in that room, specifically the new offensive coordinator, and specifically the history of where things have been under Bo Nix at quarterback. Davis Webb is now the offensive coordinator. Sean Payton, technically speaking, in his history, has had a very spread pro-style offense at the helm, where the extensions of the running game, or the running game for his point of view, are those screens. And I think that there's a very real chance the actual running of the football might not necessarily be what the fans would want to see. What I'm trying to say is Davis Webb, their new offensive coordinator, comes from the Mike Leach system, the air raid system. That's, to a certain extent, the same way of thinking of a Sean Payton, of a Bo Nix. There's a very real chance that Bo Nix will still be in the top 5 of passing attempts by season's end. That's what I'm trying to say. And so much so that it leads us into the conversation of wide receiver 3. I think the wide receiver 3 conversation is not about, is it going to be Troy Franklin? Is it going to be Marvin Mims? Is it going to end up being one of those other players that steps up? Pat Bryant, right? I think it's going to be one where they're going to be looking at the simple matchups for what they're going to be constructed as and they're going to be using wide receiver 3 as their one of their designated matchups for the week, meaning Troy Franklin could be the one that, is that wide receiver 3 against the Seattle Seahawks. It could be Pat Bryant going up against the San Francisco 49ers. It could be Marvin Mims dicing up the Los Angeles Chargers over there, for when they play. I think that there's an opportunity where the Denver Broncos and that offense is going to be a case where they actually might pass the ball a little bit more than what people think. Now, I still think very much that they have a better running game than they did last year. Still, that does not necessarily mean that they're actually going to be lining up literally in 13 personnel, 12, 13 personnel all the time. But it's just the idea that I think there's a very real possibility that Bo Nix still leads the league in passing attempts just because this is about your quarterback and the offense that he is comfortable with.
What I'm hoping happens is that if Denver does want to lean heavy into the screen game, which I do expect them to do so, it's because
you just muted yourself accidentally, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I feel like Denver can lean into the screen game if they're good at it, and I want them to be good at it. I want the blocking to be better on these screens. That way, when you whip them out, they go for the 7 yards per clip they're intended to go for, as opposed to the 2 or 3 yards per clip we had seen before. And that was because of the subpar blocking. So that's where I think we can improve and not lean on the screen game as much as a quasi run game as well. So if you can combine those two things, I believe the screen game is going to become a lot more efficient. And we were talking about who's going to step up and be that wide receiver 3. I'd even throw Evan Ingram into that conversation because he's a wide receiver. We really should be talking about him as a wide receiver, and you can definitely use him as that mismatch guy from the slot or even out wide as well. So I could definitely see a scenario where your wide receiver 3 is Evan Ingram.
So we had a conversation or a question, is Coleman C.J. Anderson? I don't necessarily know if he's a C.J. Anderson. A lot of people, even some pundits, have felt like he's actually a duplicate of J.K. Dobbins. And it feels so funny or bad to actually say this now, and Gage knows where I'm going with this because of the comp that I gave Jonah Coleman. But my archetype or comp that for Coleman was Josh Jacobs. I would hope that he is not the Josh Jacobs.
What we just saw from Josh Jacobs.
Not what we had just heard, and unfortunately, the news that just happened with Josh Jacobs, hopefully it's not that. But I think that where it gets stylistically the same with him and Jacobs is, I think, the part of it for Dobbins, or frankly even Coleman, that I think is very underappreciated is the balance, the athleticism, the way that they can bounce off of contact. I think that's where I think it's going to be very interesting, for him. But I honestly really don't hate the J.K. Dobbins thing. And so with this conversation of running back, because maybe that's a conversation where we actually didn't actually spend maybe too much time on, if you will, and that's the running back room. There is very much a world where Jonah Coleman is your future running back 1, right? I think we can all agree with that. But I think that, but down the line, but I think that your realistic expectations for what he is going to be giving you right now in the season, Gage, is the Tyler Toilet role, the Tyler Bidet role.
Or Samaje Perine to go a little further back.
Right. If you can come in and be your pass-protecting third down back, even a player that's going to be an extension of the passing game and stuff like that on the right now of your rookie year, that is invaluable. And I think that what people need to remember is just, for as great as it was and the story that it was to see Tyler Bidet continue to hook on the Denver Broncos roster, unfortunately that ship needed to be sailed. And that's kind of what made the signings of Jaleel, as much as we liked his story, the signings of Jaleel and the signings of Tyler Bidet back on the roster a bit kind of puzzling. But I think that where the Broncos really did themselves well here is they went out and they smartly, addressed it with Jonah Coleman. No, he wasn't the 6'2s, the 6'3 backs that they needed of the big physical backs, but he is a big physical back that's not your prototypical, back that they probably were looking for, like the Mike Washingtons of the world that I fell in love with, right? Who of all things is with the Raiders. But it's just like he's the player that frankly is like the Maurice Jones-Drews of the world. They are stocky, they are built, they've got great contact balance, and so maybe that's another comp for him a little bit. But I just think that the expectations should be tempered just a little bit, right? As far as that year one, where if he can just come in and be that Tyler Bidet role and that pass protecting back, we'll be sitting pretty.
I try not to come across as a Jonah Coleman hater because I like Jonah Coleman, and I think that Jonah Coleman has the potential to be a really good player in the league for a long time. And I think he's got potential to stick here in Denver for a long time. But I guess it's just the unrealistic expectations that I think a lot of fans have for him that kind of rubs me the wrong way. When I evaluated Jonah Coleman on film, I saw a player that didn't have the greatest burst or explosiveness. I thought his vision at times was a little bit apprehensive, especially in that Ohio State game and some of the other more Big Ten games and games that are going to be a little bit more close to an NFL level competition. If he sees the hole very clearly, he'll hit it. But some of those quick to close holes, I just felt like he wasn't quick to see him, wasn't quick to hit him. And that combined with the lack of burst explosiveness just feels like kind of a deadly combo at the NFL level and not deadly in a good way. I hope that I'm wrong. I'm hoping that we see more of the 2024 version of Jonah Coleman where you did see that burst in explosiveness. There were some reports that he was dealing with a knee injury last year, so maybe that deterred it just a little bit. I'm hoping that we see more of that 2024 version, but right now, my expectations for Jonah Coleman is that he's going to be that long-term Samaje Perine type player. Maybe in a few years, if he gets thrust into that RB1 role, he can develop and he can take it by the horns and become the guy at running back. But I don't have the expectation right now that that's ever going to happen.
I would say if they are, granted, they evaluate things a little bit differently at times. But I will say with the fact that they were able to luck out, if you will, and getting him in the fourth round and still a relatively high and trade up for him, if you will. I think that there's a very real chance he's not a Samaje Perine type role long term. If he is a long-term Samaje Perine role, I will say that is a pretty big disappointment, I would say. But I think that, when you look at it from the standpoint of the initial part of it and his initial welcome to the NFL, here's your roster, the Bidet Samaje Perine role for right now is perfect for him, the chance for him to be able to develop. But I think where it's really going to be meaningful for why he does earn a little bit more snaps than the Tyler Bidet. And I think you see a little bit more versatility of this offense in roles where I think you'll see not just Jonah Coleman on the field, but I think you'll see Coleman and RJ Harvey on the field, is it allows you so much more to work with, knowing the fact that you finally have that three-headed monster and a running game that you can actually rely on in short yardage and stuff specifically once the postseason starts rolling around, because, you need a player that can handle the workload. And I think for all intents and purposes, Coleman has shown the propensity in college that he can handle the workload, right? Like he can handle the workload. And so I think that, I think it would be pretty disappointing if his long-term role and his long-term projection, for me at least, would be a Samaje Perine role. Now, I think that's something as he becomes a veteran and maybe the legs are a lot older and stuff, and he's like 32, 33 years old. At that point, yeah, there might be a point in time where he kind of reverts back to that. But as far as the kind of a career about that, I think that would be a little bit underwhelming.
Can you bring up the comment from Rodney? The last one?
Last one.
The Davis Webb RPO one? I mean, possibly, but I thought we saw a lot of RPOs in last year's version of the Broncos offense. Like, we saw a lot of RPO screens, a lot of RPO, like flat concepts, like rollout, sprint, flat concepts, stuff like that. Will we see more like RPOs where there's like a designed quarterback run element to it? Possibly. Like, we could see a lot more true zone reads and stuff like that, but I believe it's going to be a lot more of those RPO bubble screens, RPO tunnel screens, stuff like that, where it's kind of clear cut. Either you're handing it off or you're throwing the screen, basically. That's a lot of stuff we see in these modern pro spread systems. And with Davis Webb coming from that tree, I definitely think we could see a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to, I think it comes back to the idea of, it's going to be what Bo's comfortable with. And I think that for what he has, Bo, one of the best things that he ever did and one of the best quarterbacks that he is, as far as one of the college quarterbacks and NFL quarterbacks, was he was one of the best RPO quarterbacks. It was what he's most comfortable with. And it's one where he makes some of the best decisions out of RPO. And I think that that's one where they would be smart. They would be really smart, as far as to do that. Rodney asks if RJ Harvey is going to be a third down back. Now, I will say this. Jack asked that. Does RJ Harvey be a third? That's where I think the future of Jonah Coleman and RJ Harvey could get a little bit interesting. Maybe not so much like where, and frankly, I guess you could say bad news about J.K. Dobbins on this. And when I say bad news about J.K. Dobbins, it's just the reality of the conversation of J.K. Dobbins. And that is, he's never played a full season in his career. You know what I mean? Like, he's never played a full season in his career. And so I think that when you look at it from that standpoint, it's one of the reasons why him being projected as a running back one down the line is, I think, rather smart. And I think that for Harvey, there's a world where he could be a third down back, because I think that the part of it that I think surprised everyone, even the team and obviously us prognosticators, was that he was one of the best pass protecting running backs on the team, right along the lines of, J.K. Dobbins, if you will, when he joined the Broncos. Unfortunately, as much as there was that one or two game stretch where Harvey looked fantastic, he still didn't do enough to really take a stranglehold on that running back one. He did have over 10 plus touchdowns. You can't ignore that, right? But I think that there's very much a world where he kind of turns into this Darren Sproles type role for the team, and that is a good thing. That is a good thing. I want to remind people that is very much a good thing. But I very much do think that there's a world where your 1-2 in the future could very well be RJ Harvey and Jonah Coleman.
I think that's the ideal scenario, and that's what Denver's hoping and banking on. So we'll see, man. It's just really dependent on, can Harvey's vision improve? That's the first thing. And that's not really relevant to like the pass catching, pass protection stuff. We already know that he's good in that area, but can his vision improve? And can Jonah Coleman prove me wrong with some of the concerns that I have about him? Like, those are the big question marks. And if they can, then yeah, absolutely, they could be your RB1 and RB2 moving forward. And that's what Denver's hoping.
We touched on it. Thank you so much, Cornbread, man. we touched on it as far as York and Murdoch. We didn't get a chance to talk about Miles Scott. This is not the singer, but the safety. But yeah, Miles Scott, and maybe that to his point here. I think it kind of goes to the conversation, and as we kind of like are peeling down the roster as we're kind of wrapping up the show here. I think that's another conversation where if your depth battles is the swing tackles, the tight end 4s, the tight end 5s, the safety 3s, the safety 4s potentially, you're the mark of a good football team. And I think that in terms of this football team, that safety 4, safety 3 is going to be a very interesting conversation in training camp. We did touch on Barron, the flexibility of him being able to be a safety or that joker, if you will. But they did bring in Miles Scott, and he is a special teams demon. And I want to remind people they did have one free agent signing, outside free agent signing, and it was Tyson Anderson. I also want to call into remembrance, they made a signing last year, 2 signings last year that were supposed special teams demons in Sam Franklin and JT Gray. They became blunders. But it does
Trent Sherfield as well.
Trent Sherfield as well. But it does show you they value special teams a lot. And so I think that the idea of them maybe carrying 5 safeties again is very much in the realm of possibility, to where Devon Key has a very open chance to be that safety 3 on this football team. I think he makes the team. But you can't rule out guys like Miles Scott, being maybe that safety 4. So I think there's a very real world where maybe they do keep 5 safeties again.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say I do think it might be tough for Miles Scott to make the team, depending on how they feel about JL Skinner. If JL Skinner is going to be that special team safety for you alongside Devon Key and Tyson Anderson, then I don't know, man. Maybe they're thinking practice squad year 1 for Miles Scott, even though they spent a draft pick on him. I think just because of the sheer depth that you have there with Devon Key, with JL Skinner, with Tyson Anderson, who they clearly covet, it's going to be tough for Scott. It really is. I like Scott. I think he's a really good player, and I think what he can bring to your special teams unit is really good. It's just you have so many guys who can bring that value already. How do you fit Scott in?
The other part of it, too, is there's a world where they're talking about JL Skinner. There's a world where in a linebacker room that is plenty open, and a player who's pretty big and built like Cam Chancellor, his one of his favorite players, maybe they turn him into that type of player where he's more of like, that outside linebacker, but he's in essence a third safety, but they put him at outside linebacker. So I wouldn't be surprised if that could be something specifically too in that like vein of really open things up. And obviously, I realize this is going a little bit long, Gage, and I'm really sorry, but it's just like
I love it.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't get a chance to talk about probably one of the last things, and that is the undrafted free agents. We haven't necessarily touched on them as much, but I think there's a world where 2 of them is on the practice squad. One of them semi makes me happy. The other one may make me happy because both of them are from my favorite school. But I think that there's a very real chance I might be a happy camper, because if you look at it from the standpoint of the Broncos and the money that they doled out, York was the number 1 top seller, if you will, the person who got that contract signing bonus. Then it was Tyler Miller. And the other one was Dasan McCullough. And what I'm about to tell you guys is don't watch his Nebraska tape. And it's the same thing for Dane Key. Don't watch his Nebraska tape. Watch Dane Key's Kentucky tape. For Dasan McCullough, watch his Oklahoma tape and watch his Indiana tape. The way I described him last week, Gage, for Dasan McCullough, everybody talks about like, okay, he's the Kirkland brand, right? Or the Walmart version of some player, right? He's the dollar store version of Isaiah Simmons. He can play everywhere. He plays everywhere. And for anybody that does not know, McCullough has a long history, with Sean Payton. Dylan McCullough was with Sean when he was on the coaching staff for the Philadelphia Eagles, and that really kind of started the relationship with the McCulloughs. And then Dasan, really his only time where he really made his own decision was when he transferred to Nebraska, because he was there at Oklahoma. He was there for his dad when his dad was the head coach there, and his dad left to go be with Indiana. Well, he there transferred to Indiana, and then his dad got promoted to the NFL. I think he's back in college right now, but he was with the Raiders, if I'm not mistaken. Raiders or Bengals, I can't remember. And then at that point, he kind of did his own thing, and then he ended up going, to Nebraska, and obviously that's where everything went to die. But it's just like you can play him anywhere. He plays safety, linebacker, edge. I mean, anywhere you want to play him, he can play that role. So when I say he's a dollar store Isaiah Simmons, he's a dollar store Isaiah Simmons.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. I mean, you already touched on Tyler Miller as kind of a UDFA that we're keeping an eye on. Dane Key, of course, Colby Katzis. I'm definitely keeping an eye on him just because of his return ability. And then Torian York, of course, that's probably the one that's been on everybody's radar. So, yeah, this UDFA class definitely has a strong chance of continuing the tradition of at least one making the team.
Yeah. It's going to be a very fun ride, and I think there's a chance Dane Key makes this team for a world of the Dane Key the key connection, if you will, and also too, when I say make the team, I mean practice squad, and also yes. Sean loves those big-bodied physical wide receivers. And Gage would be remiss if I didn't say I put at least on the radar that I think Dane Key would be a Denver Bronco last year when he was a Denver Bronco, just because of the fact that he's like the physical wide receiver, just blocks his tail off, and it's everything that Sean Payton has always loved, and obviously the Devon Key connection. It was right there in front of me. And so I think there's a very real chance that that he's on the team. Jack asked me to highlight the jersey behind me. So it is my favorite player of all time, Ken Griffey Jr. Of all time, Ken Griffey Jr. And so that's one of the reasons why I kind of went with the baseball theme, if you will. So the T-shirts, Pablo Sanchez from Backyard Baseball, arguably the greatest video game character of all time. And then, so for anybody that cannot see too, this is gonna be fun. Some of the Broncos memorabilia that I have here is, do you guys remember the? I believe it was like the little figurines that were like football players. I don't know if you remember this, Gage, but it's like these little guys.
Yeah.
Like this is, so like that is Terrell Davis. I have a Neil Smith in my den, which obviously you guys can't see because of the way that I do my stream. And then obviously Peyton freaking Manning,
say it properly, Cam. Peyton fucking Manning. Gotta say it properly. Give the man the respect he deserves.
And then, of course,
oh, that's beautiful.
God bless Bo Nix.
I love that jersey combination, man. The
so I
blue
will
pants.
I will say I was shocked and also disappointed. One, shocked because they chose that jersey combination because it's a sick jersey combination. And two, they came out with the throwback version of that. And I'm mad I didn't get the throwback version of that. And then obviously this is one that's going to probably, pump up some of the people that are huge Bronco fans in the chat. So I have the replica of the old Mile High Stadium. Yeah, and then and the reason why I got that was because I have the actual one, which is Empower right now, which at that time was Sports Authority Field, and so it's like, well, it would make sense if I kind of complemented one another, and I did, what is it? Old Mile High. And then obviously this is one of my favorite signings. And it's the two favorite Bronco players of all time. I'm biased about it. I am biased about it. But this helmet right here, signed by Demaryius Thomas and Justin Simmons, who I hate you, Justin. Why did you have to announce your retirement, which I expected, on my trip when I took the 2 weeks? I'm just saying, man.
Come on, Justin. You got to consult with Cam before you do these things.
Yeah. And then this is Super Bowl 50 helmet signed by Super Bowl 50 champion Darian Stewart. So yeah. Funny enough, Jack's asking about the Ken Griffey Jr. It is the classic like when he played with his dad, Ken Griffey Jr. Sr. uniform. I also have, because I'm obsessed, and Gage knows this, but I'm obsessed with Ken Griffey Jr. And so like I have his Griffey Air Maxes, if you will, and spoiler alert, I'm buying his Cincinnati Red Griffey Air Maxes. I do have Victory Lap. I do have a Griffey jersey, like a vented jersey. And then the last thing that I would say is, and Gage, you don't know this, but I have a mouse pad. Obviously, everybody knows about the famous picture that I have hung up over here, but I have a mouse pad of the picture from the Detroit Lions game when Simmons picked that ball off and they went to the circle with, Baron Browning and Shelby Harris and Caden Stearns and, Jonathan Cooper and Ronald Darby and, everybody that was on the field at that point in time. And obviously it's one of my favorite pictures. So thanks for kind of like humoring me, if you will. And, Jack, you started this. Yeah. So, a Bo Nix jersey with all white. You know what? I have a jersey complaint, Gage. Why do they not sell the Vapor Fuse all the time? It's like the best quality jersey. And so like when I'm going out and I'm actually like looking to find a jersey, the only Vapor Fuse, technically speaking, that's available is like Pat Surtain. I have a Pat Surtain Vapor Fuse jersey, but it's like that's the only style jersey that's available. Or even if there is others available, it's like a custom. And why would I want to pay $400 for a custom Vapor Fuse uniform? So
yeah, seriously.
So anyway, thanks, Jack, for kind of taking me down a little bit on some of that swag a little bit. And if I have some time, I'll kind of show you guys a little bit what's in my bookcase a little bit. It's a really nice collection, and I really do enjoy. But thank you guys so much for hopping in the chat. Gage, do you have anything else to say? I know we ran relatively long.
No, I enjoy talking ball with you, man. Always all kinds of fun. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, thank you to everyone on Broncos Syndicate for sticking with me. And again, just in case you guys missed the message at the beginning, I am in the process of a move right now. So as soon as that finishes, that's when we should be back on the grind. Probably going to be out of this place by the end of the week. So hopefully, as soon as we get out of here and get settled into at least a temporary place and then soon settled into the new place, the content grind will be back, and that's going to time up well with OTAs and all of that stuff. And before we know it, training camp's going to be here. So yeah, guys, it's going to be a really exciting time, and it's going to be nice to get back on the grind.
Gage, Ronnie is asking, as far as the record prediction, I said 12-5.
I mean, I haven't given my official one yet, so my unofficial one that I'm just pulling out of my head right now is going to be 12-5 as well.
No. Thank you so much for all the great comments. And Michael, one of the jerseys I have is a custom white jersey as well. So yeah, it's the white is just a really beautiful jersey. Again, thank you guys so much for the comments. And, like we said before, make sure you guys hit the subscribe button for the MHRT Network page as well as the Broncos Syndicate. And please have your friends and their friends tell each other about the 5280 podcast as well as the Broncos Syndicate and as well as the MHRT Network. So make sure you hit the subscribe button. There's a join feature to bring it up again. There's a join feature that is $2.99, $6.99, and as well as $11.99. You guys choose whatever option is best for you. As far as the Broncos Syndicate, you just heard Gage. He will do. He's going through a bit of a move right now, but yeah, he definitely will be pumping out a little bit more content here in the near future. Myself, Rodney, it seems you're a Broncos Syndicate person, but as far as myself, I will be doing a mainly Broncos show, I'm assuming this week, trying to kind of talk through as far as like what the conversation and topics will be, but that'll be Thursday at 7 p.m. Mountain Time over here on the MHRT Network.
And so, yeah, go check that out if you're from Broncos Syndicate. Go check out Cam's show, Mainly Broncos. Fantastic show, man. Always an entertaining watch. So I would go check that out. The guys over there do a fantastic job.
But of course, thank you guys so much, for all your guys' support, all the comments. And obviously it's just the two of us, but it seems appropriate to kind of invade it a little bit and end it with a God bless Bo Nix.
Let's go Broncos! God bless Bo Nix!
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame miles. So high.